everyone. Welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candace Marie. Thanks for joining me. I'm excited to be here this week and help you guys navigate the astro weather for July the 13th through the 20th, 2025. Major headlines: Mercury is turning retrograde this week in the sign of Leo. Please don't forget to give me a thumbs up, like this video, consider sharing with other astro-minded friends. Click the bell button and subscribe. That way you're alerted as to when I have new videos that are out. And leave me a comment below and let me know if you guys are feeling this Mercury retrograde coming in hot. So it's going to be turning retrograde, obviously, in the sign of Leo, stirring up some drama. And obviously, it's connected to communication, right? Mercury, as well as self-expression. So think of this as a several-week period where you have a chance to revisit creative projects, maybe refine your voice a little bit, and shine brighter. We just want to do that without tripping over some of the retrograde chaos. So I'm here to help you guys navigate that. I'm going to take you through the 12 rising signs at the end and talk about all the transits happening this week in between. Now, if you guys haven't seen it already, my Saturn in Aries bootcamp is available. If you guys would like to pick that up, click the links below in the description. Head over to my website at beyondtheveiltarot.com. 2-hour webinar to help you guys navigate the Saturn transit like a pro and really make the most of it, especially if you have any personal planets in Aries or if this is your Saturn's return. Can be really helpful this week, especially because Saturn's turning retrograde. Equally, follow me on X at BTB Astro if you want to see more of my astro musings and some of the cosmic tea. And I'll be here live on Friday at 6 o'clock p.m. Central Time. That's 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, doing live astrology readings. So join me. I'd love to see you guys there. It's always fun on Friday nights. All right, so the weekly vibe in a nutshell, guys. There's going to be lots of emotional stuff kind of going on this week. We're going to see the moon going through Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, Taurus, and Gemini. We will also see the final last quarter moon that's going to be happening in Aries, and that'll be around the 17th. Really kind of asking us to pause and reflect and release something. And right around the time that that's happening, we're also seeing that a couple days prior, Saturn's going to turn retrograde in Aries. It'll be on the 13th. And then Mercury is going to go retrograde in Leo on the 17th. I think that's really urging us to slow down, reassess, and refine our goals, especially in regards to communication. And there's a biggie happening this week, which I'm going to create a separate video for this in itself. But Mars will be conjunct the South Node in Virgo. And this is really going to be peaking, I would say, like the 18th of July through about the 21st, 22nd. Sometimes Mars transits hit a little bit early. So this is a really significant transit. It's going to be reactivating also eclipses that we have seen in Virgo, and obviously emphasizing the South Node's themes of letting go. That could be bad habits, jobs, anything revolving around, being a perfectionist, and just things that are no longer serving us. And it can also kind of stir up some anger, some frustration, and we can see some tensions rise. Uranus is now in Gemini, so how are you guys feeling with that transit? Obviously, as Mercury turns retrograde, it's going to be influencing Mars in Virgo, the South Node in Virgo, Venus in Gemini, Uranus in Gemini, because obviously these are all kind of signs that Mercury is associated with. I was laughing my ass off earlier, by the way, because I did in my Mercury in Leo video. If you guys didn't see that, it was meant to be a Mercury in Leo video. It ended up being like more of like my Mercury retrograde video, but I'm going to touch on some of the themes again today. I was talking specifically about the Mercury retrograde that we had last summer when Mercury turned retrograde in Virgo and went back into Leo. And we had that big like Windows, issue with like the outages that we saw with like the blue screen of death. A bunch of people couldn't get into, their work computers, planes were down, all kinds of chaos ensued. In this last week, there was a huge Hotmail hack. Many Americans may not be aware of it, but it was pretty big in parts of Europe and the UK and other parts of the world, millions upon millions of people have Hotmail accounts. So they were locked out. Supposedly there was like a hack. Supposedly they figured out who it was, and it was like a group of teenagers, no joke. So whether that's true or not, they were able to apparently bring down some of those systems. They had, businesses that had to kind of close down for the day. They had a bunch of people that went home. But I mentioned that in that video, and then I heard about like the hack with the email, right? Very Mercury retrograde, but also very Uranus and Gemini kind of upending, youth upending something about communications and connections. Anyway, I mentioned that because it's kind of similar to the retrograde we had last year. We know sometimes when we see the retrograde shadow, the pre-shadow, it can start showing us some of the stuff that's going to be coming up during the retrograde period. So I'll give you guys all the insight on that and what I'm kind of predicting and kind of feeling and how to navigate that also over the next couple of weeks. Now, other than these key transits, we are going to really focus on the spotlight of the Mercury retrograde. So this is kind of my part 2 of Mercury in Leo. Now we're going to take a look at Mercury actually turning retrograde. Now that'll be taking place on the 17th of this month, and it'll go all the way until August 11th, 2025. Mercury retrograde happens 3, sometimes 4 times a year. Honestly, life goes on. We can't stop what we're doing. We have to just kind of roll with the punches. And the pre-shadow has actually been in action since about the 29th of June. So as you guys are watching this on the 13th, it's pretty much been 2 weeks of already seeing some of the pre-shadow stuff that's been going on. And it started when Mercury hit 3 degrees of Leo, or around 3 degrees. It's actually going to retrograde back to 4. And we're going to see the retrograde continue basically until August 11th, 2025. Mercury will go retrograde from 15 degrees of Leo all the way back to 4 degrees of Leo. So if you have anything, I would say 3 to about 16 degrees, personal planets, a node, even an angle, sun, moon, or rising, pay attention if you've got planets in those degrees, as Mercury will be retrograding directly through there. And we're going to see the post-shadow actually continue until about August 24th, 2025. So pretty much 2 months, end of June to the end of August is when we see this kind of retrograde motion energy that's affecting whether it's retrograde or it's in a shadow effect. So other than the people who have planets between 3 and 16 degrees of Leo, I would also say my Gemini risings, you guys are going to be impacted because this is your chart ruler turning retrograde. My Virgo risings, same thing, Mercury rules your guys' chart. And fixed signs in particular, I think are going to be feeling this one as well. So if you happen to be like a Taurus or a Scorpio or an Aquarius rising, sun or moon, in particular, I would say you're probably going to be feeling it the most if you're going to be within that 16 to about 3 degrees. But even when Mercury retrogrades back, it'll station at 4. It's still going to oppose Pluto by about a 2-degree opposition. So faintly kind of reminding me of the recent Mars retrogrades that we've had in opposition to Pluto. We know that's kicked up a lot of drama. Now let's talk a little bit about what Mercury retrograde is, right? So we hear the retrograde, a lot of people just assume because of pop culture, astrology, oh, it's the end of the world, everything goes wrong, what's happening? Maybe, but not necessarily. You know, from Earth's perspective, it looks like that it's moving backwards in the sky. So it's really kind of bringing up the themes of a slowing down or a breaking down effect that's happening with Mercury, which is the planet of communication. Mercury rules technology. It's also about travel as well as decision making. So when we have a retrograde, we find that there can be issues in those departments. We can also find that it's much more about internal kind of connection and communication. And we're being asked to return, review, revise, and reconnect rather than start new ventures. So I think in Leo, this retrograde is really emphasizing, you know, anything revolving around revisiting self-expression or revisiting creativity, maybe old romantic partners, and also leadership tendencies that we have out in the world. What you want to be careful of when Mercury is retrograde in this sign is that it could be riddled with major ego-driven miscommunications and obviously some dramatic misunderstandings. This is definitely a very dramatic fire sign. Now, I'm interested in the Sabian symbol, and I literally had an aha moment as I was reading it, and I was kind of putting together my weekly spiel for you guys. Somebody called it my Sunday sermon. And I'm going to read to you guys the Sabian symbol where it's actually going to start its retrograde, and that's going to be 15 degrees, but we're going to round up and we're going to read 16 degrees. You guys have heard me say in previous videos many, many times, the Sabian symbols are meant to be figurative, but sometimes they can be literal, okay? And I think this is one of the situations where we're going to see some literal effects connected to the Sabian symbol. Now, the Sabian symbol for 16 degrees of Leo is sunshine after a storm. And the keyword is recovery. Now, the theme is bounce back. So the symbol speaks to the recuperation and the ability of individuals to re-enter life fit and refreshed after major stress and strain. The image of sunshine just after a storm speaks to healing and rebirth. The storm is seen here as a process of cleansing and purging. Times of upset and turbulence are necessary means for clearing away whatever stands in the way of healthy growth and functioning. The emphasis here is on recovery, reconstruction, At its highest, the symbol represents emotional ability to hold steady through turmoil and confusion and not lose sight of the higher purpose of all things. Watch for emotionalism and a tendency to fly off the handle or get upset over every little thing. The accent is on recuperation, restoration, and healing. Freedom and happiness follow limitation and sorrow. Your greatest advantage lies in using the stress productively, staying centered, and looking for the silver lining in the clouds. Guard against letting yourself get thrown off balance by disappointment or loss. Don't rain on someone else's parade or dampen their enthusiasm and joy with your bad mood. Stepping stones: recovery, recuperation, relief, improvement, restoration, healing, reestablishment, renewal, rebirth, cleansing, purging, clearance, and health. Well, living in Texas, I would have to say, definitely looking at what's happened with a lot of the storms. Like I said to you guys in last week's video, I'm like 60 miles away from where everything happened in Kerrville. Tons and tons and tons of rain. It almost feels like it's been raining the entire last month. And then seeing the other flooding that's been happening in the United States. We saw a major flooding that was taking place in New Mexico. We're seeing it in parts of Illinois. I'm hearing that there's still stuff going on in the Carolinas and in Tennessee. And I think a lot about how this is connecting to, there's been a lot of sorrow, there's been a lot of loss, there's been a lot of grief, but also we're hearing about how it's incentivizing communities to kind of go in and go, what can we do to make things better? What can we do to make change? I was kind of delighted to see even in my own hometown that they're announcing that they're like installing all kinds of new sirens and other like alert systems for flooding and also potentially for tornadoes, which being a California girl is still a little crazy for me, but it is what it is. And I think that this connection and the association is that whether it's a storm that you've been going through emotionally, or there's been something that's been kind of like raining on your parade, or there's been something that's kind of gone sour, this is the opportunity to now go, okay, what are we going to make of this? What's going to come of this? Like, what are we taking away from this? And what are we learning to make things better? So when I think about this degree and its association, I really feel like it's invoking a moment of renewal. And it's like that clarity and that epiphany that we have when all the clouds kind of, go away. Making room for optimism and obviously looking at the period that we have had where there's been turmoil, there's been challenge, and like making the best of it. So maybe the storm represents the emotional, mental, and kind of external upheaval, while the sunshine can really signify hope and resolution as well as a return to vitality. I can suggest that this period is actually a clearing of tension where light and warmth restore confidence and really illuminate the path forward. So in Leo, I think it's emphasizing our personal radiance. It's also about creativity and the power of self-expression to overcome all difficulties and really reclaiming our inner spark and shining brightly after navigating what has felt like a last couple kind of chaotic weeks. Now, the key themes I think that I would connect this to obviously is renewal and hope, because the storm is really bringing a fresh perspective and renewed energy. It's also about resilience and overcoming some of these challenges, maybe strengthening our self-confidence as well as our self-assurance and creative expression. I think a lot of this is like the need to shine through using art, leadership, or just really enhancing our personal identity. So Mercury was stationing retrograde. We're going to see this as a period of introspection for 3 weeks. So that's going to kind of kick off, really happening from July 17th through August the 11th. When this happens, it might be prompting a review of how you communicate your identity, your creative ideas, maybe even your leadership style. And yes, Mercury retrogrades are notorious for bringing delays or sometimes missteps. And Leo isn't just about creativity and self-expression. It's about taking risks. It's about the stock market. It's connecting to joy, creative projects, romantic partners, particularly people who we have love affairs with, or playmates, creative partners. This is also about younger people, children as well. And this is going to give us the opportunity, I think, to really think about how we can refine our voice in these topics and really reconnect with a sense of passion. Now, I'm also interested in the fact that Mercury retrograde at 15 degrees, which is smack dab in the middle of, obviously, Leo. The 15 degrees of the fixed signs, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, are very pivotal degrees. These are considered critical degrees. And rightfully so. It's like in the midpoint, basically, of this energy that is very fixed and it's not wanting to turn, it's not wanting to change. 15 also has a connection and a correlation with Gemini degrees. So yes, we're going to hear a lot of crazy stuff about Gemini leaders. Yes, we're going to be hearing a lot of change in direction with media narratives. Obviously, Gemini is connected to the news, newspapers, news stations, radio, broadcast. and also news being revealed or kind of coming out about Leo characters, artists, performers, movie stars, anybody who is in the public eye. And a theme that we have seen that's happened with the Mercury retrograde and also with the Mars retrograde in Leo that we had earlier this year is that they were both in opposition to Pluto. Now, to be fair, Mars opposed Pluto exactly twice in Aquarius, beginning of 2025. We saw that in January and also in April. Mercury will not be in exact opposition again. We've already had the Mercury-Pluto opposition, but it's materialized as some very jaw-dropping, I think, things that really kind of connect and pertain to some of these themes. We have seen a complete kind of case closed on what has happened with Epstein case. It's all say on that, especially as it pertains to power struggles and abuse, Pluto and children. And also we have seen a dismissal of a whole bunch of charges with P. Diddy, which is very much kind of the same vein with that Mercury-Pluto opposition, damning information, disclosure, stuff that's shocking and surprising. And it happened at 2 degrees. And so I have a theory just astrologically that a lot of it was kind of holding back some of the impacts if this news were to break, if there were to be kind of more discourse or disclosure on the financial system, because 2s deal with banking and money. So I think that's part of it. We may hear more. It's not unusual when there is a Mercury retrograde. There is a change in narrative. After all, Mercury is going to be tied to Venus and Uranus, so it can be about vehicles. It can be about changes with media companies. It can be changes in regards to educational systems, as well as Mars and the South Node, which can be about health, news information, narratives that are changing about health, about job numbers, and also the direction in where leaders are going when it comes to warfare. Mars is going to be about military. So we will see some changing of direction. So I kind of speculate, are we going to hear a turn in direction with what's been going on in Ukraine? I think so. Zelensky's chart's lit up like a Christmas tree. I talk about it very explicitly in my Mercury and Leo video, as is Trump's chart, as is, his VP, and a number of other people. So I encourage you guys to go and look at the Mercury and Leo video if you haven't seen it. All you need to know is that during a Mercury retrograde, we may feel like we don't have a lot of clarity. But believe it or not, like when we have the retrograde, it's about going back, getting the information, getting the answers, and we can find that we gain clarity. Clarity is kind of emerging. Usually we'll see that a little bit closer to the Mercury Cazimi point, but as we revisit old projects, relationships, or ideas, the sun will be coming into conjunction with Mercury, which is going to highlight some of these themes. And this could suggest that we have a breakthrough. So we might discover a creative spark or resolve a past conflict, maybe reconnect with somebody. And this is especially potent for Leo's themes of confidence, performance, as well as romantic partners. A lot of us are going to experience creative renewal and the opportunity also to heal through expression. So I think kind of like the storm's aftermath implies healing, especially because it's echoing some of the influence as Saturn and Neptune are retrograde in Aries, reworking the self-image, Chiron's in Aries, healing the self, and really focusing on expressing ourselves authentically, maybe through art as well as writing or just having more heartfelt kind of conversations. I think the themes that I would really watch for with Mercury retrograde in this particular sign is not just revisiting old projects, but maybe refining personal branding, reassessing how you shine, because Leo's influence also highlights drama, romance, and self-confidence. It might be really helping you kind of focus on amplifying some of those themes, but we want to watch out for pride as well as stubbornness. Now, the challenges here obviously is miscommunications, whether that's missed emails, phones, texts, people who are not communicating well, kind of forgetting to reconnect. And we can see this in romantic or creative pursuits. I do always see some kind of tech glitch in, public projects under this sign, and delays in leadership roles, and sometimes some miscommunications when it comes to, younger people, our children, as well as our romantic partners. Now, the opportunity here is really to reconnect, I think, with past passion. So maybe polishing your voice or resolving old conflicts with flair is the way to go about it. And to best prepare for Mercury retrograde, just in general, is, definitely do back up your data, okay? Because we do see internet issues, we see glitches. In particular, this is a Mercury retrograde where we can go back to projects that we haven't finished. Make sure if you're creating or you're working on something, you have it saved. This can also be a time where there is lots of mishaps with trading, okay? So trading platforms. If you are setting things to go out that you're going to buy at a certain price or you're going to sell at a certain price, if you're somebody who sets it and forgets it, double and triple check those things. Make sure you're adjusting, your buys and your sell limit orders. Also make sure that you are really looking over everything when it comes to kind of taking chances with speculative investments like the stock market or even gambling. Be very careful because anything goes when Mercury is retrograde. This is also a time, I think, to really practice patience because this Mercury is very dramatic. At least that's what I've kind of experienced so far. I do feel like this is a time where, as we've had these retrogrades in Leo, it's about kind of getting to the heart of the matter and going, what's going to make me happy? How can I create more joy? What do I really want when it comes to romantic relationships or self-expression? How can I heal my inner child, right? How can I also be a better leader? How can I lead by example? So throughout the retrogrades that we've had this last year, both last summer we had a Mercury retrograde here, as well as the last several months we had a Mars retrograde. It's been bringing up these topics. So the Mars area of your chart is going under yet another retrograde period. But I think that we've had enough experiences that it's actually kind of helping us be better prepared for this one. In terms of don'ts, okay? And obviously some people are born with Mercury retrograde in their chart, so you might navigate this period a little bit better than most people. You might be having a Mercury retrograde that's in a trine to Saturn or maybe conjunct Jupiter or Venus, which could be a little bit more harmonious for you because you get a couple passes at some positive planets. But I would say this is not a good time to be launching new projects. In particular, Mercury retrograde in Leo is like if you're trying to, go and pitch a show, if you're trying to, go and promote a theatrical play, if you are trying to launch an album, if you are trying to launch your own business, right? Mercury is about transactions and business and communication. So doing this under Mercury retrograde may actually stunt the ability for it to be as successful. I'm going to double down on that, especially because Mercury is opposing Pluto, which means there's going to be some kind of dissenting voices or people who are going to be challenging what you're creating or working on. I'm also going to double down on that because Saturn will be retrograde this week. And I actually really like that this Mercury retrograde will come into a sextile with Venus in Gemini. So it's really good for people who are like, I want to rebrand myself. I want to redo my website. I want to get back into blogging. I want to get back on social media or finding some ways to be able to get your voice heard. Retrogrades are a great time to actually work on something, just not get ready to launch it into the world yet. So another thing I would say is Mercury deals with vehicles, okay? Especially with Venus and Uranus and Gemini, a lot of people are going to be changing their mind about what they want. There's going to be a lot of drama over contracts and negotiations, so definitely read the fine print. And this is a time where I would say we don't want to be making impulsive purchases. In particular, I would say that's going to be a little bit more prominent maybe for my Cancer and my Capricorn risings because the retrograde is going to be kind of in financial houses for you guys. And obviously, don't force your opinion or maybe ignore feedback because I've observed that Leo's pride can actually backfire when we see some of these things that happen. A lot of people are going to be giving constructive criticism and feedback and stuff like that. Maybe work with a sextile to Venus to kind of refine what you're thinking, what you have to say, what you're learning, where you're going. Also work with some of the trines when Mercury stations. It's going to be in a little bit of like a wide trine to Saturn as well as Neptune. So it's a good time to kind of rework and revision. So work with this retrograde, basically. I think it can be beneficial when we get to the other side of August. All right. Tips in order to kind of navigate this too. Journaling is really helpful during a Mercury retrograde, especially to clarify your goals. Double check your emails and your texts and use this period to refine your creative spark and embrace Leo's courage as your own truth. Just stay humble. For more of that, check out my Mercury in Leo video, but I will show you guys like a couple of dates that I think are prominent. One of which is obviously going to be when Mercury turns retrograde, and that's going to be happening later in the day on the 17th, if I remember correctly. Yeah, okay, so the 17th going into the 18th. So it'll turn retrograde in the late hours, and it's interesting that when it turns retrograde, Mars is directly connected to Mercury, and it's coming into conjunction with the South Node. And it makes me hopeful that something that may happen around like the third week of July is that we change course or we change direction when it comes to conflict and war. other astrologers have speculated that it is possible that the energy of the Mars South Node connection can actually amplify conflict and bringing up past conflict and kind of trying to instigate war, and that there can be some kind of like, attack or military mobilization. And that's very possible. But I speculate that it's more about how a leader, because Mercury retrograde in, Leo is going to be about how a leader is dealing with handling, media or communicating or expressing their exact process or plan when it comes to war and conflict. So are we going to be getting more involved in foreign wars? Are we getting out of them? Are we going to be breaking away? And I think a lot of this is going to cause, just some frustration and some outrage just in general. And a lot of it's going to be driven by what's going on with the media narrative. Anyway, Mars South Node can also be conflicts and attacks. So I'm hoping that that's not the case, but I still got to kind of put that out there. Something else that's going to be interesting, obviously, will be when Mars conjuncts the South Node, which we're going to talk about in today's video. But I'm looking at when that starts setting up, like the 20th and the 21st of July, when it meets at a 19, which we know is a Libra degree. So it's going to be about relationships, balance, harmony, diplomacy. Can that be found? Or are we being too critical, maybe, of relationships and partnerships and allies? I don't know. Mars is directly connected to Saturn and Neptune, where individuals are kind of lost and confused or angry or agitated about what's happening at work, what's happening with health programs, what's going on also with leadership, and maybe losing faith or feeling like there is a lack of direction. While simultaneously, Mercury is going to be very much connected to Uranus, what will be the moon, and Venus in Gemini. So the 20th, the 21st are going to be big media days. I do anticipate there is like a change in direction with narrative. And Leos and Geminis are going to be big characters because of the degrees which this retrograde is actually going to be at. Will we see more information pertaining to some of the stuff that's happened over the last 3 or 4 weeks during the shadow, like some of the Epstein stuff, like some of the P. Diddy stuff, like some of the things that happened with the email hacks? Are we going to see more where there's going to be more things that are going to be revealed? Possibly. I think that's possible. And then as we kind of go through this, we will see Mars starting to separate from the South Node by about the 23rd. The Sun will come into an opposition with Pluto. So if you guys haven't seen my new moon in Leo video, check that out, because that's going to be one of the feistier ones, I think, all year. And then we will see the Mercury cazimi, which looks like it's going to be taking place, I believe. Is it going to be 8 or 9 degrees? I think I've looked at this a couple times. Nope, going the wrong way. Sorry, guys. The Sun-Mercury cazimi is basically the halfway point through the Mercury retrograde. And this is considered a pretty positive transit because Mercury is making a superior connection with the Sun. But looking at this, it looks like it's going to happen right around the latest degrees of 8 degrees, the very beginning of 9 degrees. So that's really kind of splitting hairs. I think a lot of people would consider that 9 degrees. I don't know. What do you guys think? July 31st, 2025. This will be the cazimi. And the Sun's in its home, sign. So it's going to be particularly powerful. I think with the cazimi taking place, this is kind of like where we have the epiphany, the awareness, there's some kind of insight. Maybe finally we're seeing a change in direction, or things are a little less fiery and heated. But this is the day where we have like that breakthrough and we start to kind of gain clarity about what's been happening during the Mercury retrograde. Mercury dies in the heart of the Sun. It comes back. This is a day of like downloads, insight, information, strong intuition. And I'm liking some of the aspects that I'm seeing throughout the Mercury retrograde to Saturn and Neptune, and also, the sextiles to Uranus, which is definitely going to quicken the speed of communication and information. However, Moon's going to be going through Scorpio when the cazimi happens. And that Scorpio moon is going to square Pluto. It's also going to square the Sun and Mercury. So there's going to be probably some jaw-dropping information about what's kind of going on in the world economically or financially. It could be a lot of like money stuff, because Leo's the markets, Scorpio is going to deal with debt and taxes, Aquarius is going to deal with how the collective is reacting and kind of responding to what's going on with changes. And if there's one thing I know, the Mercury retrograde really lights up the Bitcoin chart. It also really lights up the New York Stock Exchange chart. So it's pretty common when we see Mercury retrograde, we see changes, directions with the market. It could go higher, it could go lower, but we definitely see a fluctuation and change as Mercury is kind of connected to kind of data and information analytics. I speculate a lot of this is actually more so connected to job information, job numbers, massive layoffs, and that being connected to the Mars South node, which I know is happening. I just heard there was like, I think, several thousand people that were let go from Microsoft. So I'll be looking at, what's going on in the tech sector because Mercury is connected to Uranus and Gemini. I'll be looking at how that's impacting the markets. I'll also be looking at what's going on with job numbers because I think all of those things are going to kind of connect. All right. So Mercury obviously will continue its retrograde. We will see that all the way up until the beginning of August. It will station retrograde, and that's going to be happening at 4 degrees, and that's going to be on August 11th. That means that the Mercury retrograde is over, but something to think about is that Mercury is still in opposition to Pluto, so it brings up this tension of the mind and disclosure and what we are purging and kind of putting out into the world, and the brave journalists and leaders and people who have things to say. Pluto can deal with the shadow. So I kind of saw it a little bit this week where I think it was Nicole Shanahan came out, who was originally running as the VP with RFK Jr., put out like a whole, like basically, expose on what's been going on with the government and environmental themes. Okay, that's all I can really say about that. But go and check it out. It's really interesting. Goes back several decades talking about what's been kind of happening with the air, with the skies. Very Pluto and Aquarius, kind of trying to wake up the masses, revolving around how this is actually impacting everybody, but also like younger generations. And that's very like Mercury retrograde in Leo. Anyway, Mercury goes direct. It's still in opposition to Pluto. So we're going to see some of those kind of intense themes that we saw at the end of the end of June, early July, when Mercury first opposed Pluto. However, Mercury is going to be in a sextile to Mars. Mercury is also going to be trining Saturn and Neptune. So I, for one, I'm not going to say I look forward to this retrograde because the shadow has been kind of but I look forward to working with the energies during this retrograde because I feel like there's going to be a lot more structure and stability when it comes to creativity as well as personal joy by the time we're getting to later in August. Now we'll come out of the shadow then. That'll be basically done once Mercury has hit what will be 15 degrees. So we're looking at the 24th. It looks like that's when Mercury is going to leave shadow. Going into the 25th, it'll hit 15 degrees. So right around there, the 25th of August is when things start to calm down. But then we're getting into what's going to be eclipse season. So it doesn't quite feel like we're getting a break, to be honest with you guys. Something else to think about is not only Mercury's connection with just a bunch of other planets at the time of the retrograde, but while it's in Leo, it's very much impacted by the sun. So not only are we looking at, Mercury retrograde starts with the sun in Cancer, so it's much more home, emotional, dealing with the past. It can also be a little bit more internal, right? Less external. But once that sun goes into Leo, forget it, especially when we have the new moon that's going to be in Leo on the 25th in direct opposition to Pluto, which is very do or die at 2 degrees, money, resources, what's going on with the individual where people are wanting to have growth, they're wanting to take chances, versus I think this Pluto in Aquarius is this very kind of like dystopian, like end of the world, futuristic, what we have to do and what rules we have to kind of abide by type of like life. Versus Leo, that's like, well, why can't we create new systems? Why can't we, institute new leaders? Why can't we talk about creative ways of managing or handling things? And that's going to set up a whole, 6-month kind of cycle of where we're going to see some, I think a lot of polarizing kind of perspectives on money in the future of like finance. But I talk about that a little bit in my new moon video. But once the sun goes into Leo, you're going to see at the end of July, much more boldness, I think much more directness. There's going to be a lot more assertiveness. And I'm liking that even in the midst of a Mercury retrograde and a very intense new moon, that the sun is trining Saturn and Neptune. What this is trying to do is it's trying to get individuals to focus on, okay, what are you committing to? Like, what is the price that you're willing to pay or the sacrifice you're willing to pay? Or how are you willing to kind of commit to your dreams, your desires, your personal joy? And how can you get creative with some of the, new goals and things that you're kind of setting for yourself? So lots of things to kind of unpack here. Obviously, we'll be kind of looking at it as the month goes ahead. But hopefully that gives you guys some help and some insight. And if you stay tuned to the end, I'll take you through the 12 rising signs. I'll tell you guys where Mercury is retrograding for your sun, moon, or rising. Let's go ahead and get into the week ahead for July 13th through the 20th, 2025. And as always, if you guys are watching on Sunday, happy Sunday to my Sunday crew. I hope you guys are well. I'm glad to be here with you while the moon is in Aquarius. Such a great time to be talking all things astrology. Now, in terms of what's kind of going on today, we wake up with the moon in Aquarius. It is going to be obviously really highlighting social themes. So connection with friends, anything revolving around goals, future-related things. Heavily kind of influenced now by Uranus and Gemini, as Uranus is the ruler, as well as Saturn in Aries. And they're in a sextile to each other right now. So individuals and changes in the way that we think and connect and communicate bring spontaneous opportunities for socializing. We will say that the moon is going to sextile Chiron and Aries this morning, so that's going to be bringing up healing conversations. It's also about innovative ideas and like who we can connect with and how we can kind of feel like more a part of like a group or a network. Now in the PM hours, we're going to see the moon is going to enter into Pisces. So when that happens, it's a pretty significant vibe change. Because obviously the Pisces moon is going to be more introspective, it's more emotional, it's a water sign, and it's going to be more about kind of being behind the scenes. So depending on where you are, that's going to be happening kind of at least central time, like the early evening hours. And when it goes into Pisces, what it's going to be kind of picking up on is going to be Jupiter in Cancer. And so one thing I do like now is when the moon goes through Pisces, is it's for the next year, it's going to be coming into a trine at some point with an exalted Jupiter. So this feels very emotional, very kind of soft, squishy, sensitive, more homey, honestly comfortable, cozy, in bed, watching TV, having, dinner with family, doing our thing type of evening. So I think it's going to be a quieter evening. However, now when the moon goes into Pisces, it's going to come into a square with Uranus. So even though this is like wanting to be, kind of like retreating and quiet, it's feeding off of a square to Uranus, which means there could be some disruptions, in terms of communication with people, phones going off, travel plan changes, shifts with neighbors, shifts with siblings, kind of Gemini people. And that'll be happening pretty much right off the bat because it's going to square at a 0. So that could bring a little bit of like emotional tension. And then it's going to continue going through Pisces in the overnight hours. So, I think the key transit really for the day, it actually has nothing to do with the moon. It has to do with the fact that now Saturn is retrograde. And if you guys enjoyed that full moon in Capricorn, even though it looked like a quiet moon, maybe it was like the trine to the South Node and Mars that made it a little bit more spicy. It was definitely giving Pluto vibes for some reason. I don't know why. Because Pluto has left Capricorn, but it was also probably picking up on the fact that Saturn was getting ready to turn retrograde. Saturn has been stationing this whole last week. So Saturn retrograde, obviously in Aries, is really kind of bringing up for a lot of people that it's time to review, discipline and independence. And that's going to be different for everybody depending on where Aries is in your horoscope. Aries, it's not a sign that Saturn fares well in because this is a sign that is about starting new things. It's about youth. It's about also taking risks and chances and not really thinking about the end goal. And Saturn is kind of like an elder. And this is about long-term plans, commitment, maturity, responsibility, authority. So there's a lot of clashing energy where until we learn how to channel this energy, we can't really be taken seriously. So now Saturn joins the retrograde Neptune in Aries, and they're going to be side by side, guys, basically from now until the beginning of next year. At least when Saturn's retrograde, we can reevaluate and reassess, but it seems a little cloudy because Neptune is there as well. If you guys didn't catch my videos on Saturn and Neptune retrograde, I put those out. I also talk about it in the July horoscopes. Now, the feeling that I'm kind of getting for Sunday is that, the Aquarius moon earlier in the day, it sparks intellectual and social vibes, but once it shifts into Pisces in the PM hours, it's bringing much more of a dreamy kind of sensitivity. That square to Uranus makes me feel like you're going to probably be wanting to kind of have time where you're turning your phone off or you're not engaging with people, or you're able to have some private time, or you're able to get some rest. I recommend doing that. And Saturn's retrograde is adding a much more serious, I think, undertone to this particular transit and really trying to get us to reassess our long-term goals. Watch for that Uranus square. It can bring some sudden emotional shifts or potentially even some tech glitches that are coming up from people on Sunday night. I recommend on Sunday to connect with friends and communities, go and do something socialized earlier in the day. If you don't have any plans, get it out of the way before the evening hours. And then in the evening, you can lean into something that's more creative and kind of spiritual practices, and avoid any impulsive reactions to surprises, because that can definitely come up. Maybe do some journaling about your responsibility, or take a look at where Saturn is in Aries in your chart and where you're kind of focusing on maybe strengthening your commitment to that part of your chart or your life, and really aligning with like some new goals. And like I keep telling everybody, when Saturn turns retrograde, we don't want to kind of ease up. We actually want to work harder, because we'll be rewarded when it goes direct later in the fall. All right, so this is now going to take us into what will be Monday, July 14th. And in the morning, the moon is still moving through Pisces. Make sure you set those alarms for Monday morning. Some of you guys are going to be feeling like you want to hit the snooze button. Monday morning's great. I like the moon in Pisces trying an exalted Jupiter. I feel like on one hand, we could be feeling better rested, more emotionally supported, a little bit more optimistic, a little bit more also kind of tapped in. Just watch for expansive emotions because of the trine to Jupiter in Cancer, and maybe feeling a little bit more nurturing or a little bit more optimistic. What we will see happening later in the morning is the moon's going to come into a square with Venus in Gemini. So we've got a mutable square, which means part of us are still kind of feeling like we're a little bit more like likely to retreat, or we need some time to reflect, or maybe we're just kind of unsure. And that square to Venus at an 11 means that there's changing emotions and feelings revolving around finances, relationships, and resources. So it does show a little bit of like romantic or social tension. And then what we will see is the moon is then going to keep going through Pisces throughout the day. It's not going to make any other aspects, but overnight we will see the moon connect with the North Node, fateful things, significant, spiritual downloads, dreams, visions, intuition. And the moon is going to oppose Mars in Virgo and the South Node. So honestly, I have personally noticed this, and maybe it's because I'm in a 12th house here. When the moon goes through Pisces and it makes oppositions to the South Node, it has always shown me like what has to go. Like I'll have dreams that's like, you need to stop eating this, or you need to stop doing this, or this person's got to go, or you got to stop this situation. And it's been actually really helpful for me, because it's almost kind of given me some insights before things actually happen. So my advice is pay attention to your dreams on the 14th. I have a hunch for some people that when the moon comes into contact with the North Node, because it represents dreams and intuition, dharma, destiny, where we're going, for healthier emotions, right? It's bouncing off of the Jupiter in Cancer transit. Many of you guys, through meditation, time in nature, reflection, sleeping, dreams, whatever, you're going to get some insight that's like, hey, listen to what your gut or your soul is telling you about what has to go. And to be quite literal, it could mean you have a dream that's like, hey, I got to quit my job. Or, if I keep doing this bad habit, it's going to make me sick. Or, this is what you're super angry about, and you have to kind of like cut this person or this situation loose. It's going to be different for everybody, but pay attention to what happens on the 14th. Definitely circle back, give me some feedback, because I'd love to hear about how it manifests for you guys. No real major aspects happening on this day. It's just mostly going to be lunar things. Watch for that amplification of intuition and empathy. Yes, the squares between the moon and Venus are going to bring some confusion in relationships. And that overnight opposition to Mars could spark some emotional tension or overthinking, but also opportunities for intuition and emotional breakthrough. I'm thinking that the trines that are kind of set up to Jupiter earlier in the day is definitely bringing much more faith when it comes to emotional connection. I would say for Monday, just in general, trust your intuition. Clarify boundaries when it comes to love or family matters, and maybe avoid overanalyzing conflicts. Especially going to be later at night, and I would be meditating or engaging in creative outlets to channel that kind of dreamy Pisces energy. All right, so this is going to take us now into Tuesday the 15th. And the moon is still going through Pisces. Okay, so lots of people getting their sleep and their dreams on. And it's now going to come into a trine with the sun. So nice aspect. When the sun and the moon trine, obviously everything's kind of in flow. We're also going to see when the morning begins on the 15th, the moon is still conjunct the North Node. Okay, so it already opposed Mars. That happened thankfully overnight, at least for this neck of the woods. And we're going to see it trine the sun in Cancer. So that's about a harmonious kind of emotional flow. It will be in the afternoon going into the evening that, depending on where you are, for me actually it's going to be the evening, the moon's going to move into Aries. So it's a pretty substantial shift from the North Node moon, which is a little bit more emotional, kind of soft and connected, to boom, PM hours, moon's going to go into Aries. It's immediately going to come into a conjunction with Saturn and Neptune. It's like kind of whiplashy. But it's interesting that when that's happening overnight, the moon is connecting to Saturn and Neptune is very Piscean. So it's almost like we've been thinking and kind of sitting and like stewing in things the first half of the week. And then we're getting to like the 15th and the 16th. And it's like, I'm going to do something, right? I find that interesting. No major aspects on the 15th. What you guys need to know is that when the moon shifts signs and goes into Aries, it'll be overnight. It's going to conjunct Saturn and Neptune, and it's going to sextile Pluto. So if you're in parts of the world where you can use this, I kind of see this as like an opportunity where, you can really shift the PM energy to something more fiery. It can also be intensified because of Saturn and Neptune's kind of dreamy discipline. The sextiles to Pluto add transformative power, especially socially and in terms of like the collective. But I think like the big transit for this day is going to actually be the sun trine the moon. So I think that that's going to be much more kind of like emotional and sensitive. I also think that there could be, with the moon kind of coming into contact with the North Node, this deepening sense of emotional or spiritual insights. And, that trine to the sun in Cancer is providing us with some emotional clarity. My thought is for the 15th to reflect on your purpose in the morning, embrace taking bold action in the evening, and avoid rushing into decisions. Especially because the moon will be coming into contact around about conjunction with Saturn and Neptune. So we might not be seeing things so clearly, or we can be a little bit more critical or hard on ourselves. Obviously, Saturn retrograde is demanding a little bit more patience. And Neptune is retrograde as well. So we're trying to kind of ground things out, but we're not really seeing so clearly. Still could activate some dreams maybe. That could be happening on overnight on the 15th into the 16th. All right, so we're going to keep things moving. Now we're going to go into the 16th, which is going to be Wednesday. And first thing in the morning, the moon is now separating from Neptune, and it's going to be building into a square with Jupiter later in the day. Now, my kind of thought here is that square to Jupiter can bring up some emotional overreach between Aries, the individual, our goals, our desires, our needs versus that of the past or home and family. While the moon's going through Aries, we're watching what's going on with Mars, and Mars is not conjunct by degree the South Node yet, but time and time again, I find that Mars transits have a tendency to hit a little early. So you may be feeling the effects just because the moon's in Aries of Mars and the South Node. The other thing is that we're also going to see that this is kind of building into what is going to be a last quarter square moon. So that's going to be coming up as well. But just focusing on the 16th, the Mars South Node conjunction is amplifying release. Moon will, however, start coming into a square with Jupiter, and then eventually it's building into a trine with Mercury. Now, what we're going to be watching here as the day goes on is we're going to pick up that moon square Jupiter where we're feeling a little bit more emotionally reactionary. This is going to be the early afternoon, and it's at an 8. So we're responding to change, emotional change, I think. And then, the square may also like exaggerate things. So it can like exaggerate emotions or plans. And then the moon's going to keep moving throughout the day, and it's building into a trine with Mercury, which could spark bold ideas, but it's also hinting at some of like the retrograde showdowns and slowdowns. And it looks like that's going to be happening. Looks like overnight. So overnight, the moon will sextile Venus, and it's going to trine Mercury. Moon trine Mercury could also bring up some dreams too. I wonder if people are going to be a little bit more active in that department. We'll see. All right, so my thought is to navigate Wednesday the 16th. Obviously, the moon's in Aries. You've got Mars conjunct the South Node. you got to be mindful of your temper. You got to be mindful also of your assertiveness. There is a sense of needing to see ourselves a little bit more clearly and maybe not being so critical of ourselves or demanding such perfection from ourselves, but also holding ourselves accountable for things that aren't working or old, outdated ways of doing things emotionally, on the job, whatever that applies to. I would say channel this energy into creative projects, but maybe avoid overcommitting. Watch for the tension between personal and home and family or domestic matters. And I would also say clarify communications before Mercury's retrograde actually kind of kicks off. Now, this is going to lead us into the 17th, which will be Thursday. And on Thursday, we wake up and the moon is still in Aries. And early in the morning, it is trine Mercury. So, the 16th and the 17th is like the final moments where you can kind of get something done in terms of the Mercury retrograde if you're trying to do it prior. Although I think for a lot of people, we benefit from going through the retrograde. But you got to do what you got to do. Moon trine Mercury is still amplifying communication. We are also going to see that now the moon is coming into a sextile with Venus early in the morning. So that does enhance more kind of like playful connections and communication. And Mars is inching closer and closer to the south node, and the moon will actually in conjunct or quincunx. I've noticed a lot of people with this that there is digestional issues, inflammation, health issues that are popping up, surgical related things, things that are connected to, conflict or hostility with like coworkers. I think a lot of this is just the aspects in Aries that are in conjunct or quincunx Mars in the south node. And the fact that Mars is the ruler of Saturn and Neptune. I think it's pretty safe to say like a lot of people are maybe not seeing themselves so clearly, or they're not aware of like where they're carrying a lot of hostility or rage, and like also the impact that can have on our bodies. I think that's a big part of the transit. The other thing that I think about is also on this day, the moon is coming into what is going to be a square with the sun in Cancer and a conjunction with Chiron. So things actually like, as we're getting later into the day on Thursday, to me, things kind of unravel a little bit. The transits are really tied to the last quarter moon, and that the last quarter moon, which is happening in the evening, is like that turning point where it's like, okay, everything's kind of closing down. We have to kind of clear some stuff out. There is some breakdown and kind of finally dealing with crisis before we come into what will be a very intense new moon in Leo. So we start to see the square happening between the moon and the sun that's really building in the PM hours. It's around dinner time, right around 24, 25 degrees. And it's interesting that the square is going to be at 25 degrees because it's a Aries degree. So usually when the moon's in Aries, we're more independent, we're more assertive, we're more direct. We want to kind of get out there, get active, and we can be a little bit more feisty. And this is saying like we're needing to take action when it comes to our emotions or dealing with the past or clearing out the past or making changes at home or with family, and like feeling more assertive and more called to do that. That could also be Cancer themes like, with roommates. It could be with property matters. It could be also people being a little bit more fiery or feisty about what's kind of going on in their home country, right? Cancer. What else are we going to see? Mercury will station retrograde very late in the evening. That'll happen. So right after you see the square between the sun and the moon, then the moon's going to come into conjunction with Chiron, bringing up some communication wounding and issues. And then Mercury's going to turn retrograde basically right at the end of the 17th going into the 18th. So when you wake up on the 18th, we're in Mercury retrograde, but I don't think anything is going to be all that different. I think we've already felt a lot of the things that have been coming. And when we wake up on the 18th, the moon has now shifted signs. So rather than being heavily focused on Mars, now we're looking at moon in Taurus is highlighting Venus. All right. So first thing in the morning, moon in Taurus is going to square Pluto, and it's at a 2 degree. Watch the markets on the 18th. Okay. With Mercury turning retrograde in the sign that deals with markets, with the moon going through Taurus, which is about banking and resources, with a square at 2 degrees to Pluto in Aquarius, I think a lot of people are going to be going, what is happening? What is changing direction? What's growing? What's breaking down? And in theory, Saturn and Jupiter are no longer in a square. We could actually see a lot of things go sky high. But I think a lot of what's going to happen with certain stocks and markets are going to be connected to what's happening with tech industries, what's happening with vehicle industries, what's happening also with like medical or like pharmaceutical stocks. I think we're going to see some things that are going to break down there. When the moon squares Pluto, there is definitely some emotional power struggles, and that's going to happen first thing in the morning, intense emotion. So if you're an early riser, watch for that. I think the only positive is that, hey, Venus is in a sign that's a little bit more open-minded. It's maybe a little bit more flexible. It can manage some of the, squares that can be happening a little bit better. We do see Venus starting actually to come into a square with the North and South node, which is more next week. And it's also coming into a square with Mars, which could also create some tension between communication and health habits and routines. But for Friday the 18th, there's no major aspects. I think one thing that is nice is like once we get a little bit later in the day, at least the moon is going to start coming into a sextile with Jupiter. So we might actually feel like, hey, you know what? We're rebounding a little bit come Friday night. When the moon's in Taurus, we focus on pleasure. It's about, resources and security and stability, what tastes good and feels good. So what's going to bring those things? Well, obviously, Venus and Gemini things, sweet texts, love letters, going out of town for the weekend, having options and choices, enjoying conversation more, talking and hanging out with our neighbors more. It's not entirely a bad aspect. Now, the moon will keep going through Taurus, and nothing else is really kind of happening. So I think the vibes for the day, for the most part, are going to be grounding out emotions and really seeking stability after some of the intensity that we saw with the moon in Aries. Maybe the Pluto square very early in the morning stirs up some power struggles or some deep feelings, but by the time we get into the PM hours, it'll sextile Jupiter, and that's going to boost comfort and growth. Mercury retrograde is in action. So keep in mind that with Mercury retrograde, it's impacting Venus and how she expresses and communicates what she loves and values. It's being thrown off by Uranus and Gemini, where there's some sudden pivots and changes of plans. It's being impacted by Mars and Virgo. So that with the South Node, I could see a lot of people going, I'm having some drama with my partner because, they canceled on a trip we were going on because they have work. I'm having some drama with somebody that I'm, working with because they're not communicating effectively. I'm picking and choosing between, who I want to date, who I've been with, or somebody new, like getting back into the dating game, right? Mercury retrograde in Leo. This is notorious, this particular retrograde, for a lot of kind of squabbles with, like people who aren't committed. I look at Leo as love affairs, maybe hookups, casual relationships. And the conversations that can go a little sideways during this period, or the truth that can be kind of coming out about what's not working. And a lot of the Venus square Mars is like our actions aligning with words, right? I have found myself looking at the Mars South Node transit, kind of dreading it, but also kind of going, well, it's giving us an opportunity to be like, I don't have to continue to carry a grudge or be angry or be kind of hostile about things or like fight for things. It's actually more like, I'm going to like wave the white flag and I'm going to like give up. It's trying to get us to let go of, like being kind of like blinded by rage. And it's trying to get us to tap more into the North Node in Pisces, which is ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter in Cancer is like, why have conflict or be fighting for something that's not fighting for you? Like, why not have peace? Like, why not keep to yourself and heal? And I think a lot of people will realize that throughout these transits. Equally, South Node, Mars in Vedic is actually happening in Leo. So you're going to hear a lot of Vedic astrologers say, well, we're going to see a lot of issues with conflicts with war. We're going to see war generals doing and saying things, but also we're going to see a lot of people break up. Interesting that both systems are saying a lot of the same thing. Pretty much now through about the end of August, we're going to see a lot of breakups. And I don't know if it's going to be creative partnerships, working relationships, spouses, boyfriends, girlfriends, but we're going to see a lot of breakups. And it's because when Mars starts to separate from the South Node, it's immediately going into Libra and it's going to oppose Saturn and Neptune. And that's when suddenly people are going to go, oh, well, I've said things, I've done things, I've pushed people away, and now they're really done. And that's going to be like the real split. So this is the precursor for some of that. I think words and indecisiveness and going back and forth between people can cause a lot of like rifts in relationships. So I would be careful with that, as well as how we're expressing ourselves to younger people. How we are teaching our children or how we're communicating with our children can also be like a huge factor here. All right. So as we go through the 18th, what you need to know is that, the Mercury retrograde's in full effect. So it can be causing some creative or romantic miscommunications. I would really be encouraging you guys to focus on avoiding power struggles. Also, impulsive spending can come up, and maybe revisiting creative ideas rather than starting new ones. And that's pretty much it. So we're going to now take this into Saturday, which will be the 19th. And first thing in the morning, the moon in Taurus is squaring Mercury. So not the best time to be gambling, taking risks, trying to talk to somebody about your values, your investment strategy, financial meetings. These kinds of things don't really jive very early in the morning. Communication issues can also be a thing that we can kind of see on Saturday with that moon in Taurus square Mercury retrograde, very early for some places. And then also we're going to see the moon trine Mars, which can be very productive, but it's also trining the south node. And so a lot of this can be like a lot of like drama in relationships or drama over finances or budgeting stuff, which can result as being like, okay, we're going to cut this, we're letting this go. Now, the big transit that you're going to see that's going to be happening is this is the day that Mars comes by degree into conjunction with the south node. So it's starting on the 19th. It's really going to go through about the 23rd. And I have seen this as releasing past efforts or perfectionism, but also this is where some people are like, man, I just feel like giving up. If there was ever a giving up energy, it would be Mars conjunct the south node. Second to maybe Saturn retrograde in Aries. It's like, on one hand, there are some battles we should not be fighting this week that we really just need to let go because it's not worth some of the impact that's going to have on our health or the blowback that's going to happen at work. On the other hand, I look at this and I go, one of the downsides of Saturn and Neptune is that we could doubt ourselves and question whether or not we're capable. We could be very hard on ourselves and we could literally give up before we even give something a shot or even give something a chance. And I see both sides. I think that we have to know how to pick our battles. And I think that's really the key to some of the transits that are going to be happening this week and next week. What is worth fighting for? And also, are you working a job that is making you sick and, overdoing it and kind of killing your schedule and killing your will? Are you fighting for a relationship or something that's making you feel like you're not being heard, you're not being seen, or, that you're invisible? Saturn and Neptune can be very invisible, especially as this is 12th house to Libra. But this could also mean that we are needing to become more aware of where some of our health and our habits and things that we're doing, eating, consuming, or lack of movement or motivation is actually putting ourselves in like this self kind of contained prison, Saturn, Neptune, and Aries. So this is a week where it's not just about picking your battles. It's also knowing when to kind of pull yourself up by the bootstraps and be like, okay, it's actually time to go harder, to push harder. Rather than giving up, it's like, no, I'm going to stay committed and I'm not going to let go. I like that Mercury retrograde is involved. I like that this is about teaching us creative ways or kind of digging deep and becoming our own, I think biggest support system or maybe our own biggest hype man and trying to find fun or creative ways to actually kind of stay committed to some of our projects. I think I could see a lot of people with Mercury retrograde in Leo and Mars South Node in Virgo going, I'm quitting my job, I'm going to do something creative, and a lot of people who are I'm getting out of, a 9-to-5, I'm getting into maybe performing or writing music or trading. You're going to see a lot of people that are going to be like, why am I going to go to a desk job when I could, be learning trading techniques or investing or some kind of financial strategy? I think there's a lot of that as well that kind of comes through here. So obviously it depends on your chart, but that's just me kind of looking at it generalized with the signs. On the 19th, watch for the Mars South Node conjunction. I think the Taurus moon is seeking stability, but it's really kind of clashing with Mercury retrograde. So it can cause some stubbornness in communication and some communication blocks. And the Mars South Node is about letting go of overwork and old patterns. What's positive is you are going to see that the sun is going to come into a sextile that's going to be kind of happening. And that's going to be happening with the moon. So as the moon continues to move forward, let me show you guys that. It will sextile. This is the last nice aspect that we're going to be seeing in the evening before we come into what will be the dark moon. So that's going to be happening overnight. That's pretty much it. Now Mars is at a 19. Special attention. If you have anything 18, 19, 20 degrees of Virgo, you need to watch that this week. And I am going to be working on a video for that because I want to expand a little bit more on it. All right, so we wake up in the morning on the 20th. This is Sunday. Moon goes into Gemini, which is putting an emphasis on Mercury. Ooh, there's going to be lots to talk about on Sunday. I'll be watching the comment section next Sunday, not this Sunday. And Moon conjunct Uranus in its own right is like shocking, surprising, whoa, did you hear the news type of vibes. Trining Pluto in Aquarius, which is definitely going to be getting the collective or the internet on online with, what to think, what to say, what to share, what we're learning about. And the fact that Mercury is retrograde when Mars is connecting with the South Node and the Moon in Gemini is conjunct Uranus and Venus, oh boy. I've noticed so far with Uranus and Gemini, things are very flippant. It's like, it could be this or it could be that. And like information turns on a dime. Like we don't really know like what information to trust. Not in like a clarity issue, although it is sextiling Neptune. More in a, well, it could be this and here's the information for this, but here's the other side of the coin. Like that's how I've kind of seen it so far. I think with the Moon conjunct Uranus and trying to Pluto in Aquarius, this is a day where people are going to want to get out. They're going to want to be about. Go walk around your neighborhood, take the dog for a walk, call your friends, hang out with your siblings, do your thing. Like you can actually very much socialize and use the Mercury connection to be like, we need to have some fun. We need to cut loose. We need to do something different. It sparks curiosity, but also a little bit of restlessness, obviously amplified by Uranus's kind of more unpredictable nature. And the trine to Pluto is very powerful in terms of connection, socializing, friends, and goals. And then what we will see is Mars is coming into conjunction with that South Node. And then Mercury retrograde is kind of doing its thing. So everything is playing off of Mercury retrograde that day. So another big communication day or a change with connections of romantic partners, younger people, that kind of stuff. I would say be careful with communication this day because there's a lot of things getting activated. Focus on themes revolving around release. Maybe embrace innovative ideas, double check details, obviously, let go of old habits or grudges. But this is really the 20th, 21st, 22nd. And avoid impulsive decisions if you guys can help it. I think the impulsive decisions are going to be like buying cars, sending texts, sending letters, double texting, sending that, agitated email to somebody. Also, I think there could be major changes going on with travel, okay? I think this is really the case all week. Mercury is connected to travel, but because now that Uranus is in Gemini, there's going to be changes with air travel. There's going to be changes with commuter travel. There will be new things coming. We'll have like 7 or 8 years of this Uranus and Gemini transit, but in particular, travel changes, I think is a big theme, especially as it's squaring Mars in the South Node. A lot of people who think they're going somewhere and then suddenly their flights are changing or, they were planning a trip, but then, they get fired or they quit their job and they're like, well, I'm going to go and do something now. What is that Mars in Virgo Sabian symbol? I haven't even read it, so we're going to be reading it together. But I'll talk about this on my video this week. Oh, how funny. So first of all, it conjuncts at a 19. We're going to read 20, but 19 is a Libra degree. So conflict and communication, particularly I think with work colleagues, a lot of people maybe cutting off a healthcare provider or deciding they're not trusting a doctor or they're having a hard time getting a diagnosis, or maybe they're, recognizing or realizing that there's just something out of balance or out of whack with their schedule. But Virgo 20 is what we read. And this is an automobile caravan, and the keyword is variety. The theme is group adventure. So the symbol speaks to a man's ability to broaden horizons and find ways to make things easier for himself, and his cleverness in motivating others by selling them on a golden opportunity idea and creating expectations of a high reward. The image of an automobile caravan implies mobilization or forward movement, and it alludes to team effort and a spirit of adventure and willingness to endure hardship to reach a common goal. It suggests a concept of safety in numbers. At its highest, it represents a special gift for enriching and enhancing the potential of any experience and for making every group project an unforgettable or memorable adventure. Watch for discontent and wanderlust and the ability to sit still in one place for too long. The accent is on mobilization and adventure. It could be a day you finally decide to start getting things rolling or get moving on some project. I love that that's happening while the moon is conjunct Uranus and trine Pluto. It's like people are like, what are you waiting for? Get the show on the road. Like nobody's holding you back but yourself. So your greatest advantage lies in involving others in your game plan, encouraging them to be a part of the process, and look for ways to make difficult tasks more enjoyable. Guard against letting yourself drift aimlessly. Don't lose your opportunity by refusing to make commitments. The path of least resistance can be a slippery slope to loss of self-respect or outright failure. So the stepping stones are progress, mobilization, travel, journey, adventure, safety in numbers, group activity, following the leader. Gypsies. Interesting. It's very like Gemini, very Uranus and Gemini. stuff involving maybe like unions or people like mobilizing, together. Or it can be that we see some like, caravan kind of formation in some sense. Obviously, Gemini can be about local communities. It could be parades. It can be things kind of connecting to transportation. So we'll see how that manifests. But Mercury retrograde is going to be, I think, more kind of dramatic displays and things kind of connected to like movements. And I think it could be labor related Virgo. I think it could also be media related Gemini. So we'll see how that manifests, and stay tuned for that video that's coming soon for you guys. My thought here is, take it easy this week. Watch for the retrograde slowdown. There's going to be a lot of things where people are suddenly going to be kind of changing direction, realizing like, hold on a second, whatever drama has come up for a good reason, and now we can kind of put out the fires and figure out how we can kind of make the most of the situation. But I like how social Sunday looks for the most part. Anyway, that Mars conjunction looks like it's going to be exact, happening on the 20th around 9 p.m. my time. That's going to be Central Time, and Moon is applying to a conjunction with Venus, and it looks like as we get into the 21st, the Moon and Venus are going to square the North and the South node at a 19, and that means there's going to be a different narrative, a different change of opinion, critical turning points with relationships, critical turning points also with learning, traveling, money. Venus square the nodes as well. So stay tuned for that. We're going to see what's going to happen. Until then, let me take you guys through the 12 rising signs. Let's talk about the Mercury retrograde. As you guys may or may not know, I'm a Western astrologer. So that's the astrology that I practice, is Western tropical. I'm not a Vedic astrologer. I'm going to be showing you guys where Mercury is going to turn retrograde for the next 3 weeks, basically from this week until about the 11th of August. And this is where you're reworking, redoing whatever you need to do in that area of your life. I'm going to give you guys, the themes of the retrograde in that particular house. I'm also going to talk a little bit about some of the predictions and some tips that I had for you guys to navigate this Mercury retrograde, tying it also to Virgo as well as Gemini, because Mercury rules those particular houses. Also, my Leo risings, in particular, about 3 to 16 degrees. My Virgo risings, my Gemini risings, you guys are really impacted by this. And if you have anything 3 to 16 degrees of the fixed signs, you'll be feeling the Mercury squares as well. But guess what, guys? Mercury rules the South Node. So Mercury going retrograde and planets on the South Node are definitely going to be bringing up some themes for everybody. So listen for your rising sign. That's going to tell you exactly which area of your life the retrograde is going to be impacting. You can listen to your sun sign. This will apply to your overall kind of like joy, creativity, as well as your career. And the moon sign can be helpful as well, because it can really give you insight on what's kind of happening for you more emotionally. So choose your own adventure. All right, we've got Aries and Aries rising. You guys are going to have Mercury turning retrograde in Leo. It'll be in your natal 5th house. As you know, the 5th house is creativity. This is also about romance, self-expression, dating, children, taking chances, right? Risks, gambling, anything speculative. Now, Mercury is very much tied to all these planets going through Gemini and your 3rd house of communication, as well as learning. It's also connected to your 6th house, which is very much about work, maybe your pets, your schedule, and your health. Now, there's already some tension in these parts, both with Mars kind of hitting the South Node this week, but also squares that you're seeing that's kind of building to your 3rd house, where communication maybe is a little bit more challenging when it comes to your health or when it comes to your coworkers. Maybe you're going to find that, Mercury's retrograde in your 5th is about revisiting communication in a more creative way, less drama, more action. Maybe this is also about revisiting romantic connections. You might be hearing from people from the past or reconnecting with old creative partners, maybe focusing on a new, more playful form of self-expression. It is possible that miscommunications in work or health routines may arise for you guys, okay, because of the connections to Mars and the South Node in your 6th. I predict for a lot of Aries risings that like old flames or creative ideas might resurface. It's also possible to reconnect more so with your inner child, go back to an old creative project. But there can be some glitches that can happen, some tech glitches that can happen that bring up some drama at work or kind of stall you in a creative project. Maybe there are some ego clashes that kind of disrupt work or some of your daily tasks. My advice is refine some of your creative projects and also reconnect with past passions. Even if it's like an old hobby or something you used to do when you were a kid, it might bring you some joy. Finding ways to be active as well as creative can be beneficial in making the time for some of these hobbies. Double check your work emails and also your health plans and avoid any dramatic confrontation in the romantic department. Good luck. We've got Taurus and Taurus rising. What's up, Taurus? Well, Mercury's turning retrograde, Taurus, in your natal 4th house, and this is your house of home and family. Now, this is also property, roots, your parents, your roommates, anything revolving around, your private life and your emotions. And Mercury is tied to your 2nd house of personal possessions, resources, as well as finances. It's also connected to your 5th house of creative projects, children, as well as anything kind of connecting to creativity or romance. So as Mercury retrogrades through your 4th house, you're going to be reassessing anything connecting to your home and family dynamics, maybe revisiting financial plans when it comes to home, expenses, purchases, anything that you're going to be kind of bringing into your home, or maybe creative expressions, especially with younger people, children, or romantic partners. Now, it is possible, Taurus, there could be misunderstandings in family or money matters. That's the one thing that you want to watch for. I would say I'm predicting for some of you guys that renovations or family talks can face some delays. Past financial or romantic issues resurface for resolution. Be very careful when it comes to buying cars or buying homes or, inspecting homes or signing leases. There could also be some delays with like home movement. And some of you guys might actually have like a younger person coming to visit you or coming to stay with you or a reassessment of children. Now, my tip for you guys is organize your home. In particular, I would say like your creative space, your kids' rooms. Maybe this is organizing home documents or revisiting your budget and reflect on creative goals. Just avoid any impulsive, purchases for your home right now and clarify any family discussions. And if you happen to have anything Taurus, Sun, Moon, or Rising, I would say the 3 degrees to about 16 degrees, it's going to be squaring you. And if you're early degrees, it'll be opposing Pluto and squaring you as well. So some of this stuff you're already kind of familiar with, you've been working with, really especially since the Mars retrograde that we had earlier this year. Good luck, Taurus. All right, we got Gemini and Gemini rising. What's up, Gemini? Well, it's your favorite time of the year. Mercury is starting retrograde. This will be happening in your 3rd house in the sign of Leo. As you know, you're ruled by Mercury. It is definitely ruling over this Uranus transit, even this Venus transit in your 1st house. And it's also very much connected to Virgo, which is your 4th house of your home and your family. Now, the retrograde is going to be taking place in the 3rd. So this basically means that you're revisiting how you communicate and express yourself. And this could be your identity. Maybe you're rethinking how to better connect with your relatives or your siblings. Maybe you're thinking about moving. Maybe you're trying to reorganize some family plans. And it's possible that there could be some tech or travel delays that take place, but it could also mean that you're changing direction in the way that you think about or the way that you connect to your home or family. I'm very aware that as this is happening, Mars is hitting the South Node. So I think it's really significant for a lot of Gemini risings to be like, what do we clear out of the house? How do we get things organized? What can we get rid of? Like that kind of stuff. Maybe to lighten the load to make it easier to move, or there could be some change in directions with going back home and visiting family. Anyway, I would say watch for miscommunications or tech issues. They can definitely disrupt your daily routines. You can also see some issues with vehicles here. Maybe old ideas or sibling connections kind of reemerge in some way, helping kind of give you some clarity. And I would definitely recommend backing up devices or double checking your travel plans. Not a time to buy a car, not a time to sign a lease, not a time to book any travel. If you need to do these things during this time, you can face delays, but if you can kind of hold off until later in August to make these commitments, it would be better. And definitely reflect on how you present yourself if you can, and maybe consider taking a new course or going back to a course or a book that you still need to finish. Updating a website or a blog can be great too. All right, we've got Cancer and Cancer rising. What's up, Cancer? You're going to be doing this Mercury retrograde in the sign of Leo in your natal 2nd house of money, resources, spending power, self-esteem. Mercury's tied to your 12th house, which is subconscious spirituality, self-undoing, kind of behind the scenes. And it's also tied to Virgo, which is your third house of communication, learning. This can also be very much connected to gadgets, vehicles, siblings, contracts. So the theme is, because the retrograde is actually going to be taking place in your second, you are going to be reviewing financial strategies or your self-worth. This is also possible that there is going to be some kind of tie to maybe reconnecting with your subconscious insights. Maybe communication mishaps are possible. If it does happen, it's things that you didn't see or that you overlooked. Be especially cautious with documents. So think like receipts, banking statements, anything that you're signing that has some kind of financial connection, maybe cash handling with money on the job. It could also be anything connecting to expenses with vehicles or gadgets and things that you don't see. Like, you're more prone to kind of catch any financial discrepancies, I think, than usual. Now, this is also a time where you may feel like you're finally releasing or letting go of any fears revolving around money or security. We can't have like a less than mindset. You can't be going into this period being like super worried or stressed out about money. I know there's been retrogrades here in recent months, but actually it looks like there's actually going to be a turning point where like finances are going to improve for a lot of you guys as we kind of get through the summer. My advice here is to revise your budget. Financial deals definitely resurface. Your intuition is going to be guiding you, but there can be some cloudedness revolving around your thinking, especially when it comes to your ability to really kind of commit to your long-term career goals or whether or not they're sustainable. I would be reassessing spending habits and maybe journaling about self-worth, meditating to clarify your insights and avoid making any financial rash decisions. Good luck. All right, we've got Leo and Leo rising. What's up, Leo? I want to hear from you guys in the comments. Let me know how you're doing with this retrograde shadow. Obviously, Mercury is turning retrograde in your sign, so it's going to be a little bit more personal for you. And it's happening in the first house, which is about your appearance, your identity, how you communicate. It's also how you're expressing your goals, and anything revolving around what you do first thing in the morning. So I love retrogrades in the first house because it gives you the opportunity to really go to work on yourself. I know you've had a lot of opportunities to do that, but I think this one's actually really beneficial, especially with some of the trines of Saturn and Neptune, about your beliefs, about your spiritual practice, about education and travel. It can have you rethink some of these areas. However, Mercury does tie to your 11th house, which is more about your goals and your friendships. And it's also connected to your second house, which is much more about your finances, your values, your self-esteem, and your money. So as Mercury is turning retrograde in your first house, there is this sense of redefining your personal brand or identity, maybe something about your look, but also revisiting group dynamics or personal financial goals. What you want to watch out for is any ego-driven missteps, like that's possible. And it's really easy when Mercury's retrograde in your sign to like put your foot in your mouth, to like say something that is like, oh, I shouldn't have said that, or that came out the wrong way, or, somebody is like misinterpreting what I was saying. And I'm going to double down on that actually, because it's also simultaneously opposing Pluto in your 7th house, where it's brought up some tension in regards to relationships with friends, with spouses, romantic partners. And I really feel like when Mercury's retrograde in your sign, it's about listening more, speaking less, and like listening to yourself in particular, like tapping into your own inner kind of dialogue. And some of the aspects that are being made to Saturn and Neptune means that if you have like a meditation practice, a spiritual practice, if you need to get away from it all, you need to take a meditation course, or you need to travel, you can do that. That's actually going to kind of alleviate some of the tension that's going on in the skies. I would also say this is a time where, old friends or community projects might connect, but communication, breakdowns can happen and it can challenge your image. So be mindful of how you're connecting with people socially, if you're giving presentations or if you're a part of a network. And use this time to really work on yourself, like, polish your personal style, maybe your social media appearance, reconnect with friends, but avoid any prideful arguments, and definitely review budgets very carefully. I've said this to a lot of Leo and Leo risings, and that's because Mars is going through the South Node. So it can mean that you're spending money on things that ultimately you realize, like, I don't value, or you may find yourself going through, your credit card statements being like, why did I spend so much money? Like, do I need these things? Or why did I buy these expensive shoes? Like, I don't even like them. So the things that you're purchasing and buying, make sure you really like them, but also simultaneously keep the tags, keep the receipts. Like, you may be making some style changes that you realize at a later date you don't really vibe with, and you want to be able to actually give them back, right? Mars South Node. Anyway, let me know how it goes for you, Leos. I hope it's a really insightful transit. All right, Virgo and Virgo rising. You guys are going to be experiencing Mercury retrograde in Leo in your natal 12th house. And while the 12th house is behind the scenes, it's private, it's more subconscious, it's about spirituality, it's also about closure. Mercury is your chart ruler. So wherever Mercury goes is where you go. And you're kind of like one of the major players this week because of the Mars South Node conjunction in your sign and that direct connection correlation with Mercury. Now, Mercury rules your identity and yourself. It's also connected to your 10th house, which is all about your career and your reputation and your professional life. Obviously, things are a little crazy there right now with Uranus going into your 10th house. You might feel like you're changing jobs, or you're going into a new direction career-wise, or maybe you're balancing, two different occupations. And I think Mercury retrograde in the 12th house gives you the opportunity to kind of reevaluate and reassess. And this is a time where you're reflecting on inner beliefs, or there is some kind of spiritual practice that you're kind of tapping into. Maybe you're releasing old career goals, making room for new ones, and obviously hidden issues can surface. The 12th house is self-sabotaging behavior, so you can be more aware of like where you're not willing to take risks at work, or where you're kind of hiding out and like trying to kind of take a break from work. Maybe you're traveling and going to a foreign land. That could be the 12th house as well. That extended period of time off in the 12th house is the retrograde. But the 12th house can also mean that bad habits can come up. It can also mean there's drama in relationships. There's a lot of things that are kind of filtering out. And the connection with the South Node in your sign means that you're learning to not say something, because there could be a sense of like holding back with Mercury retrograde and not telling people what's on your mind or what you think. And that can result as, you kind of looking like you're somebody who is like weak, right? Mars South Node, or not actually stepping up to the plate. So I think there's a sense of you going, wow, okay, certain things build, and whether that's health-wise, emotionally, with relationships, even at work, that have been building because you haven't actually kind of either faced the music or, kind of dealt with the conflict head on or taken some kind of action. So I think it's really important for you guys to be reflecting on your beliefs and your spiritual practices and reassessing your career goals. And you'll find that hidden issues will surface, but your dreams and your intuition is very strong. Past career decisions or subconscious fears will emerge, but they're doing that for you to kind of deal with them. And your dreams, your intuition is likely going to be guiding some of the steps you're going to be taking when it comes to your professional revisions that you're going to be making in the weeks ahead. I really recommend meditating or journaling to process emotions or dreams that come up for you. Revisit career plans, but delay any major launches right now, and seek closure on old issues. Also, take care of your health as your first house ruler retrogrades in the 12th. You guys might need more sleep, or you can be feeling a little bit under the weather. Obviously, touch wood. And with Mars conjunct the South Node, be very careful with speed, heat, blades, anything that's sharp, anything like that, because you guys are more prone to having those issues, even fevers. And a lot of it's from stuff that you're not like processing and dealing with. So it can actually like make the body, put you in bed, put you in a state of rest when you have a retrograde in the 12th house. So take it easy on your health this week. All right, we've got Libra rising. What's up, Libra? You have Mercury retrograde in the sign of Leo. This will be taking place in your natal 11th house. And this is the house of networks, friends, socializing, parties, as well as goals and your dreams. And Mercury is connected to the 9th house of higher learning, anything connecting with travel or, your belief system, as well as the 12th house, which is more spiritual, hidden behind the scenes, unexpected, subconscious. So it's almost like with, Mercury going retrograde in the 11th house, what it's bringing up for you is an opportunity to reconnect with friends or communities. If you haven't been social, if you've been kind of like isolating, you can get back out there and connect with people. It can also mean this is a time where you're revisiting long-term goals or beliefs. Maybe you're reassessing how you connect to an audience, what you bring an audience, what you're sharing with them, what you have to say. There can also be travel or study delays that's possible during this Mercury retrograde period. In particular, if you're like going to a group event or a party, there can be some unexpected things changing. I would say that can happen with Uranus in your 9th house. That could also happen when you're having transits in the 12th house where things kind of come out of left field. What you want to watch out for is, I think with this particular transit, old group projects or friendships will surface, and you're being given the opportunity to reconnect with them or kind of cut ties and move on. philosophical, spiritual insights might need clarification, and your dreams may actually give you some insight as to where you're finally cutting ties and like disconnecting with certain people or certain groups. So maybe people are coming, into your dream space and you're getting closure with them. Maybe there can be a sense of also having some conflict or some misunderstandings with people, and you're feeling like rather than having it be this dramatic thing, you're just kind of saying, you know what, I realize I'm not really on the same page with this person, or that person really isn't a great friend, or there are some things that were said or that were done that don't resonate with me, and I'm making the decision to actually kind of step away from that social connection. Yes, you can reconnect with certain people, but clarify their intentions is my advice, and review your travel plans or your study plans. I expect there to be some kind of change. And trust your intuition, but obviously verify the details. I think it's especially interesting also for like Libra risings that this is happening right around the time that Venus is coming into a square with the North and the South node. And for a lot of you guys, it could mean that taking a trip or, being away or taking a course can give you a lot of clarity about what it is that you want, and maybe kind of help you reassess some of your goals in general. So good luck to my Libras. All right. We have got Scorpio and Scorpio rising. What's up, Scorpio? All right, get ready. Mercury is about to retrograde in Leo in your natal 10th house in another fixed sign. Yes, you've had a Mars retrograde here, so you already got like a little bit of like a preview, like an appetizer of this retrograde. Mercury, obviously, retrograde in the 10th house is going to be connected to your career, your public life, and your reputation, and something changing about these topics. Now, Mercury is connected to the 8th house, which is shared resources, transformation, other people's money, joint assets. It's also connecting very much to your 11th house, which is your friends, your allies, your audience, anything kind of connected to your goals. So these themes are kind of going retrograde in your 10th house, where I think you're, number one, revisiting career goals or your public image. Maybe you're reassessing your shared finances or your group dynamics, and professional miscommunications can happen, especially because Mercury has been in opposition to Pluto, or for a lot of Scorpio and Scorpio risings, like work communications, changes with the job, changes with bosses has brought on a lot of stress and pressure that's made you kind of question if you can kind of balance work and home life stuff, or if it's worth some of the trouble that's kind of going into showing up and being at work, and like where there needs to be some adjustments with either how you're getting paid or what you're kind of getting from other people. So I think about this and I'm like, this is also important for you, Scorpio, because Mars is your traditional ruler, and the Mercury retrograde is not just tied to, joint finances and other people's money, but also it's very much kind of tied to the Mars South Node transit, where there can be a sense of changes going on socially this week, where you're breaking away from being friends with certain people. That can mean you reconnect with a friend from the past, South Node. That can mean that you cut a friend off, or you're less focused on group dynamics. It can also mean that, because there's something changing at work, now you're going from, being an employee to being a manager. You're like, whoa, I have to reassess my relationship with some people. Now there's going to be more seniority. It can also mean there's a change with leadership or a change with your job. Maybe somebody from the past is calling you and asking you if you want to come back. So it's going to be different for everybody, but watch out for the professional miscommunications, especially about budgeting, money, and group dynamics. And past career opportunities or conflicts can reemerge. Financial agreements definitely need review. I would be using this time to polish your professional image, but avoid new job commitments or anything permanent. Maybe go back and reconnect with people, especially if you're in a business where you're trying to pitch things, or you're trying to kind of connect with people with media, and reassess shared resources and communicate as clearly as you can with colleagues. But I think that it's going to be difficult because it looks like the team building effort is not very strong, or like there is a sense of feeling like the connection with the group of people at work are not very unified. And so you're having to take much more of a assertive, okay, I'm going to jump in, kind of direction. Can be good for some Scorpio and Scorpio risings, especially if you're wanting to get back into work, or if you're wanting to refine something about your public image. In order to do that, it looks like you're going to have to make the necessary kind of cutbacks or concessions, but in the end, change is going to be good, and ultimately it can bring you more security and more money. All right? So good luck, Scorpio. All right, we've got Sag and Sag rising. What's up, Sag? You're going to be experiencing Mercury's retrograde in Leo in your natal 9th house. The ninth house is a house you're familiar with. Obviously, it's connected to higher learning, travel, getting on airplanes, your belief system, even legal matters, ceremonies, celebrations, weddings, anything connecting to graduations is kind of the ninth house as well. Teachers, mentors, gurus. So Mercury is tied to your seventh house of committed relationships, partnerships, as well as marriage. And it's also connected to your 10th house of your, professional relationships, more in a sense of your status, your career, how people know you, also your relationship status. So it's interesting because we've got a lot of planets that are now our placements hanging out in mutable signs. So Sagittarius, there's stuff going on where there's work changes, there's stuff going on where there's exciting new things with relationships, there's stuff going on where there's focus at home. Take a breath, okay? Because I know you're going to feel some of these transits, but the way that I see it is this. If Mercury rules relationships and it's retrograde in the ninth, it's giving you the opportunity to reassess your beliefs about how relationships could or should be. It also gives you the opportunity to reassess work. I mean, I'm sure some of you guys are going, well, things are changing at work. I'm quitting my job, or I got laid off, or business is slow. So I'm going to travel, Mercury retrograde in the ninth, or I'm going to go and take a course, or I'm going to start teaching, or I'm going to go back to school. I think that, revisiting travel plans is likely with a Mercury retrograde in the ninth, even studies going back to school or reevaluating your belief system, refining partnerships or career goals, and watch for misunderstandings in relationships. This is very likely, especially if you have philosophical differences, cultural, religious differences. Changes in travel plans can definitely bring some bumps that can be kind of happening in relationships. And now Sagittarius, you guys have Uranus in your opposite sign in the seventh. So there's already some kind of like sudden change where you're like, wow, I actually like really need a partner. And I don't know, I've heard from some people that it's like, well, now I'm getting divorced. So, I need a lawyer, ninth house. Some of you guys are like, well, actually, I just spontaneously, decided that I'm going to start talking to my sibling again. And so now you're learning how to like reconnect with them. Others are telling me that they're also, making some changes in the direction where they're going with their career. So it's like going back to school. So, watch for all of these things. I just predict for many of you guys that old travel or educational pursuits will surface, and partnership talks, they need a lot of patience right now. You can be dealing with some situations where suddenly you need a little bit more freedom in relationships, or people are acting a little bit more erratic, and they need a little bit of space, and it can definitely be impacting the way that they're communicating. And a lot of you guys are going to have a status change one way or another because of Mercury's connection with the South Node Mars. And what is that status change? I wonder, are you going from being an employee to owning your own business? Are you switching careers altogether? Is it relationship status changes? All of these things can definitely apply. Review your travel itineraries, put luggage tags on your bags. Be careful leaving, things in airports. There can also be opportunities to get closer with relationships, to take time away from work and to travel, or long distance relationships can kind of happen here. And you'll be able to reconnect with partners. Just avoid any like rushed agreements and really reflect on your beliefs during this time. Good luck. We've got Capricorn and Cap rising. What's up, Cappies? Mercury's turning retrograde in Leo in your natal 8th house. And for you in Cancer, this is a little bit more financial because these houses are kind of like money houses. Obviously, the 8th house deals with shared resources, transformation, intimacy. So think taxes, think child support, spousal support, inheritance, car insurance, life insurance, anything kind of connecting to investments, and also emotional and psychological themes and stuff connected to intimacy as well. Now, Mercury rules your 6th house, which is more about work and health. And it also rules your 9th house, which is going to be about higher education, belief systems, and travel. So off the bat, I'm kind of thinking like, is there going to be themes revolving around loans for education, health insurance, car insurance matters, where jobs are changing and that's impacting your health insurance? This can also be about travel reimbursement or getting severance or something like that kind of comes through. Or if you've been kind of going through like a tax situation or dealing with like an estate, that now we can kind of finalize some of the negotiations, right? And you will see some setbacks, but ultimately what has been kind of delayed may finally come through. Now, Mercury, I think here is really about reassessing your financial or your emotional bonds with other people and revisiting work or health routines, and definitely deepening, insights can surface when you have a Mercury retrograde in the eighth. Like secrets can come out. There can be details about things you didn't know. There can also be breakthroughs that you can have with like healing or therapy or anything trauma related. And I think really for a lot of you guys, like past debt or like intimate issues can emerge, and work or health plans can face delays. But what I like about this is that during the retrograde, it is going to be coming into a very slight trine with Saturn. So it's like the changes with emotions, home or family, are heavy, but it's happening because it's going to give you the ability to save or invest or be able to have more kind of financial or emotional security. So I think that this is a really good time to review shared finances or contracts. If money is owed or money is due, that might come up. Maybe reassess your health routines, especially how it connects to benefiting your mental or your emotional health and anything that's insurance related. And I would be really careful. I would avoid new loans or anything that's connected to debt. And if you're trying to like consolidate something, or if you're trying to pay something off, or you're trying to handle a tax matter, it can take a little bit longer. But at the end of the transit, it's going to give you some major kind of financial transformation. Good luck, Capricorn. We've got Aquarius and Aquarius rising. You guys are going to do the Mercury retrograde in your opposite sign, Leo, in your natal 7th house. All right, so the 7th house is others. Your therapist, your astrologer, your marketplace, your spouse, your committed relationships. Even Leo could be your creative collaborative partners, your children. I want you to think about the Mars retrograde, what happened December until like April. And I want you to think about what happened at the end of June, beginning of July, because there was a bit of like a intense communication period that you had with another person. And I don't know who that person was, but it could have been a little bit more challenging, and you're feeling like the way they're connecting or communicating is just like all over the map. Now, the 7th house, has a connection with Mercury being there to your 5th house of children, romance and creative partners, as well as your 8th house, which is connected to shared resources and transformation. So Mercury retrograde the 7th is pretty like textbook. Like, yes, you're revisiting old relationships, right? People from the past can call you. There can be a sense of, changing direction in a relationship, or the way that you're connecting with clients or partners. You're noticing that their communication style is changing, and there's delays, or there's kind of like a back and forth. What you can also see here is that it's giving you the opportunity to really reconnect with people. So business partners, people who you are meant to be with. Refining creative or financial agreements might be a theme here as well, even in spite of some of the Mercury communication issues. What I do like is that while Mercury is stationing, so as we get into August, it's going to come into a sextile with Uranus in your 5th. So through having in-depth conversations with people, you can actually find some surprising ways that you can actually get closer, fall in love, or have more clarity in relationships, especially with younger people or anything involving children. And it's also going to come into a trine with Saturn, your traditional chart ruler, which really enhances communication, as Saturn is retrograde in your 3rd. And this is really asking you to be patient. Be patient with getting back to you. Be patient and be listening and really integrating what people are trying to tell you. And I think that, this gives you the opportunity to really reconnect with partners and clarify expectations in relationships. Maybe revisit creative projects. And I would say this is a time where we want to avoid like new romantic or financial commitments. Sure, people from the past can come back. Yes, you can meet people. We just don't want to be pushing for commitment over the next 3 weeks, because things can kind of turn on a dime. And sometimes Mercury represents multiples. So it means that you're going back and forth with multiple people, or that there's multiple different perspectives or ways of kind of looking at how the relationship or the partnership could actually play out. And it is a little bit more challenging in your opposite sign, where this can be quite dramatic. So think about what happened with last summer's Mercury retrograde, with a back and forth with somebody. And then the recent Mars retrograde is going to give you some insight here as well. Work with some of the aspects and maybe expect some surprises, especially for like single Aquarius risings. If you haven't been dating, this could be a transit that gets you back into the dating world, or get a little bit closer to somebody who you've been trying to kind of get to know better. Good luck. And then we have our Pisces and Pisces risings. You guys are going to do Mercury retrograde in Leo in your natal 6th house. All right, Pisces. Well, the sixth house is about health, work, daily routines, pets, being of service, right? And this is a house that Mercury actually really likes to be in because it likes to have a to-do list. It likes to get healthy. It likes to get organized. And Mercury has a direct connection to your fourth house of your home and family, obviously ruling over this Uranus transit. So something about sudden changes in the home, home structure, home plans, fixing things in the house, maybe even moving, can bring real estate agents or, leasing agents, and changes with your home organization or your family. And it's also connected to your seventh house, which is about relationships, partnerships, and other people. So it's basically going to say that you feel maybe that there's more of a need to clarify scheduling when it comes to home and family or relationship themes. And what's interesting is this is third house from the fourth, so definitely communication with parents. And this is 12th house from the seventh, so it's definitely going to be bringing up themes revolving around gaining clarity about what is and is not working in relationships and whether or not certain things can be salvaged, Mars South Node in the seventh, and how that's going to be helping you kind of make decisions or plans revolving around where you're living. So because Mercury rules the fourth and the seventh house, I think a lot of you guys are going to be revisiting work or health routines. And this can mean that health issues can resurface. It means that you can gain clarity on existing health problems, going back to the gym, reconnecting with doctors, but also miscommunications that you can be having revolving around scheduling issues or people at work. So some of your relationships with like coworkers can be a little challenged. Maybe reassessing home or partnership dynamics and missteps in daily tasks make this possible. So you will have some scheduling issues that can cause some family stress or some relationship or partnership issues. I think that the key here is really when it comes to your family or partnership communications, you need a lot of patience. You need a lot of timing. You want to be picking the best times to be making some of these moves. I like that when Mercury goes retrograde into August and it's stationing, it'll trine Neptune, which is your chart ruler, your modern day ruler, which means that when you're really focused on what's most important to you and what you want the most and your values, you're going to make time for that, right? And that could be, hey, I need to spend more time with my partner, or I need to hang out with my pets more, or I need to make time for my family. It can help you kind of organize those things. And I would say organize your work schedules and your health plans, prioritize that. If you feel like you've kind of gotten off of the wagon with your health and your wellness, you can get back on and clarify family or partner discussions, maybe avoid overcommitting to tasks and doing too much or sacrificing too much for other people. Changes of jobs, going back to work, changing offices, changing schedules. This is something else that's expected and a wonderful, wonderful time to get your home in order, especially if you need to hire somebody to help you do that, or you want to bring in like a organizer, or if you want to bring somebody in to, redesign a kitchen, or if you want to hire somebody to help you find a house. It's worth actually finding people to help you get some of this stuff done. So it's going to avoid some of the family and relationship tension, which can kind of pop off. Also, the connection to Mars in the South Node. I think that there is like this frustration of all of the things that you want to get done, but you feel like you're doing too much and you need help. And it's actually showing you that some of the stress or kind of like the chaos is stemming from feeling like I don't have the support of a partner. I'm single, or my partner's not checked in, or I'm going through a separation, or I'm on my own and I need to hire an assistant. These kinds of things can kind of come up. So learn to ask for help, I think, is part of it. And some of these people are worth actually investing in to make the process a little bit smoother. Hopefully that's helpful for you guys. All right, well, that is the week in a nutshell. So that is going to be pretty much the 13th through the 20th of July 2025. Embrace some of the cosmic chaos that's going to happen. Use the retrograde to refine your voice and reconnect with your passion, and stay patient. You got a couple ways to get through this. I'm looking forward to that Kazini because I think it's going to be a big turning point. And obviously let your inner star glow through this entire retrograde period. Please don't forget to give me a thumbs up if you like this video. Consider sharing on your socials and follow me on X at BTB Astro while you're on there. Leave me a comment below and subscribe so that way you guys can let me know how you're feeling. I like the way we all give each other feedback. Sometimes I'll pepper in and give you guys some of my thoughts on your comments too. And there's always amazing people in the comment section that are always like chiming in and talking to people about their charts. So I appreciate you guys for that. I will be back this week. We're going to talk all things Mars South Node related. I'm working on some horoscopes for August. The year is going by so fast. So make sure you guys are subscribed, and I appreciate all of your support, and I will see you guys back here later this week. Enjoy the retrograde and take care.